back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. We're in the company of Anne-Elisabeth Moutet of the Sunday Telegraph. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Patrick Smith of the Africa Report, which goes to press...
Tonight, actually.
Tonight, okay.
As soon as we finish the show.
All right. Trude Grunstein of World Politics Review, and Lila Jacinto of France24.com. Thank you all for being with us. All of East Africa remains on tenterhooks after the failure of Burundi's attempted coup. President Pierre Nkurunziza returning home this Friday, 48 hours after his former intelligence chief announced his ouster while he was attending a regional summit in neighboring Tanzania. The summit, called in the third week of a crisis triggered by Nkurunziza's decision to run for a third term and a crackdown on protests who deem it unconstitutional. Lila Jacinto, we're seeing the president's return greeted mixed fashion, according to which side people support. A lot of nervousness. A Reuters television camera crew went into a hospital in Bujumbura where it appears, according to doctors, that there have been reprisal killings by police officers. So there's a lot of nervousness and tension.
Plenty of nervousness. There's no private independent media. All the private radio stations were attacked. I was thinking that this is actually the first failed coup attempt since the 2011 Arab uprisings. We have actually gotten used to dictators falling. Blaise Compaoré went, and Nkurunziza has come back. I believe I'd be happy to hear.
He's not a dictator yet.
He is not. And to be fair,
he's just shut down the opposition press.
This is true, and his attempt to seek a third term. I mean, I'm really interested in seeing is he really going to push for this, or will his powerful regional neighbors like Uganda and Rwanda and the international community succeed in bringing him down on this? But to be fair to his claim of running for a third term, because the first two terms was not before he was not directly elected. Hamid Karzai of Afghanistan had the same scenario. He was made president by the Bonn transition. He went to an election in 2004 and 2009. So in terms of an argument, he does have some point to it. But of course, if he runs for a third term, he is sitting on a volcano. And, we have not seen the end to this crisis at all.
A prediction on Twitter, I guess as usual, he'll be in total denial and continue the presidential campaign he started. That's from Annie, Patrick Smith.
Yeah, that sounds about right, I'd say. If his regional counterparts, President Museveni, himself no stranger to extended his term in power and coups d'etats in general. Paul Kagame, who's gunning for his own, perhaps literally gunning for his own third term in a couple of years' time. If they can't constrain Nkurunziza, I don't think he's going to be able to. He's had censure from the African unions. He's had censure from the Western powers. Belgium has cut the aid to the country and so on. I think it's going to press ahead, and I think it's going to be extremely dangerous. And I think perhaps this isn't the last we're going to see of problems within the army.
The two things that were up until now the more reassuring aspects were this idea of the army being a sort of an institution that could keep the peace but also remain united, and the idea that the political tensions that were coming out were remaining more political than ethnic.
Burundi with the same ethnic makeup as the neighboring Rwanda,
and the civil war, which was more ethnically based, but the recent political tensions remaining political and not. And so with the army apparently fracturing, that's one thing that's
But I don't know if it's fracturing along ethnic grounds. There's not much to support that thesis, because Godfrey Nyambara, the guy who started, he was the first majority from the majority Hutu group. He was he's the first leader to run the army from that. He was appointed by Nkurunziza. Nkurunziza himself has a Tutsi mother and a Hutu father. So I think that's the ethnic side of it is being downplayed. But I think it's a material fact on the ground that it's not as important as the governance issue. Burundi is unlike neighboring Rwanda. Burundi's economy is a train wreck. It's got some of the lowest indicators in the world on poverty, on healthcare, on educational provision. And he's done nothing, unlike neighboring President Rwanda's President Kagame to uplift the economy.
You were mentioning Kagame, and so were you, Leela. And this is an interesting point because it's a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, you say Kagame faces the possibility soon of getting rid of term limits. Yet, before this attempted coup, he was critical of his neighbor from Burundi.
Yep, I think he's got a very difficult case to make because his own opposition actually is within his own peers, really. I mean, as we've seen, his fellow fighters within the RPF, one by one, have dropped out and become extremely critical of him. However, he's got a group of civilian ministers around him who support him very strongly and want the kind of reforms. But I think he also knows that if he comes out too clearly at this stage saying, I want a third term, I've got to have a third term, he's going to blow it. I think what you're going to see is some of his acolytes within the parliament and among the ministers say, got to give Kagame a third term. He's brought stability and economic growth, and this is the difference between Rwanda and neighboring Burundi, where Nkurunziza has done nothing and is basically causing an unnecessary crisis.
And Burundi, a country that at 6 times in its history since independence has known ethnic massacres. People here in Europe and in the United States are haunted by the international community's failure when Rwanda happened in 1994. At what point does the West step in?
Well, the last time the West had, dogs in that fight, it was in Rwanda, and part of the disaster of Rwanda was triggered by the fact that the French and the British clients were in a position on the ground. So I think the West right now is extremely cagey of intervention. It seems as the stakes, unfortunately, the economic stakes are not high enough, and the political stakes are dangerous, and everybody is recovering, except for the almost million dead, of the investigation on European and French intervention in Rwanda. Nobody wants to touch it, I think.
I would agree. There will be tremendous pressure now to get some sort of dialogue. If Nkurunziza can not stand for a third term, that's where the diplomatic push is going to be. But in the long run, the international community has a lot to worry about. But about Kagame, what is interesting is that before this coup attempt, he was making the kind of noises that he was upset with Burundi for not doing enough about the Hutu militia in Congo. And anybody who knows how Rwanda plays that game, you know that these kind of statements are something that you watch for. Because Kagame can intervene, and he has done that. So I'm really interested in watching Kagame's reactions right now.
All right, something we'll be watching. This Friday's news that Islamic State militants have scored what appears to be their biggest military victory of the year in Iraq, reportedly raising their black flag over government offices in the capital of Iraq's mostly Sunni Anbar province. We can add that to Barack Obama's in-tray, one that includes war in Syria, nuclear negotiations with Iran, the Saudi-led aerial bombardment of Yemen, and some anxious Gulf monarchs to reassure. Monarchs he welcomed to the White House and to Camp David this week, some voting with their feet, staying away, like the new king of Saudi Arabia, or the king of Bahrain, who instead was tipped to attend the Windsor Horse Show with the Queen. Those in attendance heard their host insist Washington won't throw its allies under the bus once a nuclear deal is signed with Iran.
We also discussed our concerns about Iran's destabilizing activities in the region and pledged cooperation around how we can address those in a cooperative fashion, even as we hope that we can achieve the kind of peace and good neighborliness with Iran that I think so many of the countries here seek.
Judah Grunstein, how do you do?
Well, I think that he did as well as he could have, given the initial opening of the summit with all the dropouts. I don't think they would have followed through with it if they hadn't choreographed the final statement to the last letter. Anyway, I was just a little surprised by the amount of importance that's given to someone like the Saudi Arabian king's displeasure with American foreign policy. It's very obvious why the Saudis would be displeased with American policy in the Gulf right now and in the Middle East in general. They very generously invited the United States to come in and fight their war for them, and the United States has no interest in doing that. The idea that somehow because the Saudi king is upset with Barack Obama because Barack Obama is putting American interests ahead of Saudi interests, and that somehow the litmus test for successful or well-reasoned or well-developed American foreign policy in the Gulf is whether the Saudi king comes to a summit or not, to me strikes me as being not very well thought out. The fact of the matter is that the United States and the Saudis have had a partnership, not an alliance, that for the last 30 years has been transactional, based on interests that converged and complementary functions. The Saudis kept oil prices stable, and the United States contained Iran. In the aftermath of the Iraq War, containing Iran is no longer a possibility. Iran, by any measure, demographics, economics, cultural, historical, is destined to be a Middle East power. One of the countries at the table of any accommodation that takes place in the Middle East. The last 30 years have been something of a historical anomaly. It's over. The United States has recognized that and no longer has an interest in fighting Saudi Arabia's war against Iran. The United States' interest is to keep the powers balanced in the Middle East and to have it be a peaceful accommodation. The Saudis don't want that. They want to fight a war that they can't win and that the United States arguably might not be able to guarantee winning. Iran will not dominate the Middle East. Iran would never defeat the United States. They might be one of the strongest players, but there'll also be Turkey, Egypt, and the Saudis as well, if they put their investments instead of into high-cost American fighter jets into developing their population and their society. But the idea that somehow because the Saudi king, who apparently the reception goes in and out these days anyway, so that might be another reason why he didn't show up at the summit. The idea that because he didn't come, somehow Barack Obama should be embarrassed or castigated, it strikes me as being far-fetched.
Anisbeth Moutet?
I would slightly disagree because, of course, the elephant in the room is the Iran deal on the nuclear plants, the nuclear deal. And the framework that was adopted is something that distresses the Saudis immensely, much more than what's going on in Yemen and other places. And it's something on which it's fundamental. They're already saying things like they themselves want nuclear power, and there are plenty of people who are willing to take Saudi money to give it to them. So we're talking about something where the entry into the outlook for the region has entirely changed. That the King of Bahrain feels himself that he can go to a horse show rather than attend the summit is just significant. That the region right now is in a state of anger towards the United States. That's unbelievable.
And how do you feel about the fact that the Saudis are not going to get those F-35 jets from the Americans, but instead they're going to get French
I was about to say,
Rafale jets.
Right now the French are absolutely delighted because they couldn't sell that Rafale jet, which is quite good but very expensive, for years and years and years. And in terms of Saudis, it was not the price tag that was worrying the Saudis, but they had friendship with America. These things are taken very seriously by everyone, and it's the cause of most non-military deaths in the area. And what's very interesting is that right now everybody is buying Rafale and everybody is saying we have a third way. And this also, I don't think it even explains, but it's also caused by the fact that the French have been extremely strong on the Iran deal. They've said, no, this is a deal that effectively just puts back a few years Iran getting into nuclear capability.
And is Paris right to sell those planes?
You can sell the planes. You then have to fly the planes. The reports I've heard of performance of the pilots is not such that everybody should worry so much.
All right.
But the thing is that France cannot replace the United States in the Gulf. And the Saudis and everyone in the Gulf is very wise to diversify their partnerships. That makes perfect sense. The problem for the Saudis is not air power. We've seen that in Yemen. They have overwhelming air superiority in Yemen. They can't accomplish what they need to do. So a sale of fighter jets here or there isn't really going to make a difference.
Isn't going to make a big difference.
And the Saudis are nowhere near being able to respond in kind in terms of a nuclear program. They don't have the same sophistication in terms of a technical community, in terms of safeguards, in terms of anything.
Yep.
The Saudis are angry because they have not played their hand well. They're on the losing end of an arm wrestling match, and instead of investing all the money that they made through oil into developing their society, into developing the countries around them, into creating the kind of society that can peacefully resolve conflicts and disputes with their neighbors, and now they're paying the cost. Now, I'm not saying that Iran has been angelic in terms of the Middle East by any means. But the truth is that the Saudis are very concerned because they understand they've really misplayed their hand in a lot of ways over the years. They were counting on the United States to back them up at all costs. And as the British are well familiar, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests.
And Iran is about to bounce back economically and strategically with the support and the military muscle to push that diplomatic agenda, political agenda.
And that's what America gave them, and that's what the Saudis cannot forgive.
And even the oil is, not that much of an incentive anymore to keep
Right
that
now.
special relationship with DC and Riyadh. But I mean, I disagree with you because, at the heart of the matter is the Shiite-Sunni divide, right? And at some point, this story of snubs by this king and this emir, gets to the heart of the issue, which is it is the Gulf monarchies throwing a little hissy fit because the dynamic is changing, and that is extremely important because, as you said, Saudi Arabia is the campaign in Yemen is disastrous. It is uniting Yemenis against Saudi Arabia. So for journalists, this sort of puts the story out there in a way that you can understand these complex pieces of the chessboard, really.
All right, last week, France's president was upstaging Obama by getting that royal treatment we were talking about in the Gulf, the place of honor at that regional summit and the sale of Mirage fighter jets. This week, François Hollande got into Cuba ahead of the Americans, the first Western leader to visit since 1986. He even sat down with the now retired leader Maximo himself. Now, Hollande may be a socialist, but he's hardly a revolutionary, hence the pinch of irony in the cover photo montage from French daily Libération. Patrick Smith, you're just back from Cuba.
I am indeed, and it's going through an incredibly interesting period now, and people are watching every move. And I have to say, for once, François Hollande got it absolutely right. The timing was brilliant because he knows that the Americans can't do a diplomatic coup like this just yet in terms of a visit. They're gradually unlocking, 50 years of American sanctions. And France wants to be in there like Spain and Italy and indeed Britain and Germany into the Cuban market. I mean, it's been locked in this time war.
He came with an armada of business leaders,
Yep.
hoteliers in the energy sector, spirits, of course.
All the hotels are booked in Cuba, in Havana.
This is not your old Cuba, is it?
No, it's suddenly. I mean, as someone actually rather pointedly told me, he said, this country is now more dependent on Western tourism than it was under Batista. We've now got this sort of group of 5-star hotels, and there's another 10 going up in the middle of Havana as we speak, and Western investment ready to pile in. So what the American diplomatic deal is going to do is going to speed that investment up. So if Raul Castro plays this right, he could get a real sort of economic upturn from this.
All right, and when you talk of French soft power and its symbiotic relationship with the United States, look no further than the Cannes Film Festival, the 68th edition of the world's premier film festival, where the hosts love to lure the big stars, but also, correct me if I'm wrong, Elisabeth Moutze, they like to show that Hollywood isn't running the show. This year, there's only 2 U.S. movies in competition for the Golden Palm. I know the Coen brothers are presiding the jury, but there's always this uneasy relationship at Cannes between the French and the Americans.
Well, yes, but it doesn't really matter. First of all, because the other event at Cannes is the market, and the market is huge. And there's always a draw, whether it's the Los Angeles one or the Cannes one, which is the most important. But basically, all the movies that are being produced and being sold are being sold in the underground of the Palais des Festivals, in this ghastly place where you see no light and no beach, and deals are being made for literally billions. It's a fascinating event. It's got the glamour, and Hollywood respects glamour done that way because it's we don't do it the way you do it. We do it our way, and our way is beautiful too. So that works. Everybody's looking at it. All sorts of industries are involved in it. Fashion, of course, and when you say fashion, you say one of France, and when fashion, you say cosmetics and scents. And now we're talking about one of France's largest exports exports. So in so many ways, this is soft power expressing itself very well. It's, there will be homages to great stars of the American movies all the same. The Coen brothers, as you say, are presiding. Natalie Portman has a movie there. It's something where the French do this very well. It leaves people happy. Right now, the Venice Film Festival, unfortunately, is falling apart, and you've got this thing that remains is the most important of all film festivals in the year.
The funniest thing to me about the sort of French approach to American movies is that in the French cinema, there's probably no worse insult than calling something a Hollywood film. And yet, the coronation of any French actor or director is when they are either recognized in Hollywood or get an Oscar. And we saw it with Marion Cotillard. We saw it with Dujardin. The disdain that they have for Hollywood is only equaled by the desire they have to be recognized in Hollywood.
It's love-hate.
It's symbiotic. We're going to leave it there. I want to thank you, Judah Grunstein. I want to thank Leila Jacinto, Patrick Smith, and Elisabeth Moutet. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
Emma, the former president of France, he's trying to make a comeback, and looks like he's trying to win over the youth vote by answering questions on a certain ubiquitous social medium.
Yes. The former French president has taken to Twitter. Using the hashtag NSDirect, he invited the entire world to pose questions to him. This is his tweet from yesterday evening when all this kicked off, when he said, "I'll be responding to your questions from 11:30 on Friday. Tweet me with the hashtag NSDirect." Now, it's been done before by other politicians. It's also been done by stars and comedians, and it hasn't always worked out too well. And to start with, he certainly seemed rather ill at ease. We can take a listen.
He looks okay in the picture, though.
He looks surprisingly happy in that picture.
Yeah. Taking a selfie.
But he tweeted a video just before 11:30 to say, "We're off." Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicolas Sarkozy. I'm very happy to be here with you. I'm going to try to respond to as many of your questions as I can. It's the first time I'm doing something like this, using this technology. I want to let you speak. I want to be able to talk with you. It will be a regular thing. Off we go.
He looks pleased as punch.
Absolutely. Rather strange, very awkward setting. He looks quite embarrassed by the whole thing. Now, the UMP party says that they got 10,000 questions. And when you include all the retweets, it was something like 44,000 mentions of this hashtag. So it really did get a lot of people talking. But it also prompted a lot of rather awkward questions. One tweeter here saying, "I'd like to join your party, but I've never stolen anything and I've never deceived anyone or swindled anyone. Is it possible?" He didn't respond to that one, fairly unsurprisingly. This gentleman pointing out that he's under investigation currently, Sarkozy himself, for corruption and misuse of influence. He asks, where is the respect? And
that got 164 retweets. Yeah.
Yes, there were plenty like it, and a lot were really deeply offensive. And it prompted this cartoon from Hervé Baudry with the hashtag NSDirect, and it's got the bluebirds of Twitter chasing down Nicolas Sarkozy there. But some of them were a little kinder to him. This one, for example, asks if he was to be reincarnated as any of these personalities, which would he prefer to be? It includes Margaret Thatcher, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and Franck Ribéry, the footballer. But those were sort of... He actually responded in kind, if you like, by tweeting that he applauded the creativity of Twitter users and the fact that there was the spirit of debate alive and well, which certainly it was, although that was probably one of the nicer ones. If we look at the responses to what was said, Politico says, enough already. Nicolas Sarkozy asks the web for input. Input is what he got. Metro News talks about the fact that if this was just a total failure for the former French president, with jibes from those politically opposed to him multiplying throughout the night. The problem, they say, of course, it's impossible to control the content of Twitter.
Right. Impossible to control the content of Twitter. Another story that's making news in the French media, Charlie Hebdo, the paper that was the target of the Paris terror attacks, now being accused of hypocrisy.
Yes, they have suspended one of their journalists, and I'm just trying to find the correct page here because I've got so many Sarkozy tweets that you've made me skip over, and they were marvellous.
Live by the tweet, die by the tweet.
Exactly, that is the hazard of using Twitter. Charlie Hebdo accused of hypocrisy because one of their journalists, who has written extensively against extremism, has received death threats for her work, has actually been suspended. Now, she says that it's all down to the fact that they aren't happy with the fact she's spoken out about the way the magazine's been run in the wake of the Paris terror attacks, which of course started out at those offices of Charlie Hebdo. Now, she's not alone. She does have some support on this. If we look at Le Monde, one of the editorialists who works there, Patrick Pelloux, who's very famously one of the first on the scene after the shooting, he said that he thinks this is wicked and totally uncalled for, that all of those who survived should be sticking together. And again, Hervé Baudry, who is the star of tonight's Media Watch, has produced this cartoon of Zineb El Razoui, menacée de licenciement.
Yeah, because it's a problem. Here is a counterculture magazine that suddenly has a lot of money because they've got a lot of money from the.
It's a very different world for them
it's
now.
It's hard for them, yeah.
But instead of Je suis Charlie, she says Je suis puni, which is I am punished.
I am punished. All right. Well, thank you, Emma James. We'll have more later. I want to thank our panel once again for joining us. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.